6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. We have commit and we have liftoff at 2:13. And it has cleared the tower.
Prepare yourself for a world of science. This is
What is going on, everybody? Conley here with the Science Knights. We have all three knights assembled. Dr. Anirban Bhattacharjee, Dr. Sean Graham, and Dr. Thomas Shiller in the house. And, I actually had this thought. I was thinking, since Valentine's Day is around the corner, what better way to celebrate than to talk about some ways what would you say? Yeah. Animals get it on?
When a dinosaur loves another dinosaur very much.
Now let me ask you something on that, Thomas, real quick before we get into the episode. Are there any trace fossils between two brontosaurus legs of something dragging the ground besides the tail?
No, there aren't.
There aren't.
No. Otherwise, I would have talked about them at length in our previous episode.
And I always wondered, okay, I looked up roosters and chickens and hens. That's a fascinating reproductive cycle.
Oh,
there.
Yeah.
When you think about fish, they do it completely different too. Snakes and dinosaurs. What? They're not anything like, it's not like you take them out to the Riata or you go to Spicewood and you show them a good time and you're just hoping, you get some flowers. That's not what they do.
No, Daddy T-Rex was not taking Mommy T-Rex out on a date.
Okay, well, and
I guess he could have. We just don't have any
chasing down a velociraptor or something like that.
Yeah, a nice juicy hadrosaur or something. But anyway, well, we're gonna get into the way animals of all types make sweet
Some
love.
of them, like more fascinating ones, right?
Yeah, we're just going to kind of go through and we'll hit the highlights. And for some, I know there's some great ones. And there's going to be some, you guys might stump me if you tell me, hey, how does this or that do it? I'm not sure. I'm fine with it. For vertebrates, I'm pretty good. So,
okay.
But then there's a big black hole because we don't understand what a lot of the big fossil groups did, like dinosaurs. So I'm not going to be able to tell you that.
Okay, well,
speculate.
Okay, here we go. So what initiated this curiosity?
Yeah, tell me about that.
Roosters.
Yeah.
They act like, hey, they have the biggest cojones in the world.
Uh-huh.
I mean, they are mean, dude. Every rooster I've met has at least killed about 3 people.
Right.
And I always wondered, okay, wait, I can't really look under the dress and see, hey, what? He's a grower, not a shower, or whatever.
But even if you did,
I mean,
you wouldn't find anything.
I wouldn't find anything.
You would find nothing.
Would I find a little hole or anything? What's going on here?
Well, in birds, you find what's called a cloaca. So it's basically a little opening, and within that opening, you have housed both the reproductive organs and basically the butt, right?
Right.
The excretionary
number one and number 2 comes out of the same hole in a lot of vertebrates and
babies. Well, and eggs, right?
Yeah, the eggs, number 1, number 2, and the reproductive stuff. Sorry, I totally blew it. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, all the reproductive stuff, urine, and the other dookie. That all comes out from a single hole, and that's for. It's actually, you think of that, you're thinking, ooh, that's gross, that's weird. No, you're weird. Because for most vertebrates, that's the way they do it.
I mean, isn't it more efficient?
Well, it's just, the separation of function into separate openings, that's kind of distinctly mammalian.
Yeah.
And there aren't that many other critters that do it that way. So, we're going to get into this a little bit more, but even within mammals, it's a little unusual to have a common opening for the uterus, a single opening there. There's 2 oviducts, and that's the same in humans, the fallopian tubes. If you've ever seen these little diagrams, there's 2 of them.
Mm-hmm.
It's all paired, and it's all kind of symmetrical on either side, and there's a pair of fallopian tubes, and then they join into a common uterus. And that's distinctly only within the placental mammals, the group to which we belong. Marsupials, it remains separated all the way to a cloaca. And same thing with the egg-laying mammals. It remains separate. And if you want to fertilize eggs on both sides of that, the oviducts, you need a two-headed penis.
Which exists.
Which exists in marsupial mammals, it exists in the egg-laying mammals, and it exists in a ton of other vertebrates like lizards and snakes.
So how does one go about evolving that? Just for, scientific.
Is there a supplement you can take?
This is going downhill.
I don't recommend it. I don't recommend it. But no, it's the other way around. You're thinking about it the wrong way. The question should be, how do you evolve not having a two-headed penis? That's what placental mammals have done.
Oh, okay.
Because the kind of primitive condition would be to have one that's got, it's not like two enormous, ropes sticking out. It's got one shaft and then it's just got two heads at the end so that they can get into either one of those oviducts. And if you didn't fertilize both sides of the oviducts, right, you would miss out on a reproductive opportunity. So you got to make sure you do that.
And isn't it also true? There are certain very rare humans that are kind of the penis, but is it?
You got more on me than that. I don't know.
Let's not
talk humans.
I doubt it.
I do have a question. So it is interesting for the female too, especially in marsupials and roosters, and I guess a lot more, because one fertilization opportunity can make multiple offspring over a course of an extended amount of time, even years.
I think one of the things we also talked about this extended and having a lot of offsprings and having few offsprings in one of our earlier episodes. But our listeners can go back and listen to that one too.
About this really important new theory in biology, the unifying theory of biology. Whoever has the most offspring leaves behind the most babies. That influences what the new generations are going to be like and look like. Yeah, absolutely. Now, you mentioned roosters, though.
Yeah.
And so I kind of made it seem like it's totally normal to have a penis, but that's not necessarily, in fact, that's also kind of uncommon because most fish don't. And fish are the most common vertebrates. There's like 30,000 species. And there's a few that have evolved a penis-like structure for intromission, for internal fertilization. But it's pretty uncommon in fish. And in pretty much all birds, with a couple of exceptions, there aren't any. And they accomplish fertilization by this really romantic gesture called a cloacal kiss. And that's the technical term for it. A cloacal kiss. So the male is able to position his cloaca, which is the common opening for everything, next to the females, and then press it up against, and the sperm will just transfer across that distance through capillary action. It's actually not very efficient, but amazingly birds can do it really well, and it just takes them a second.
A second? It's like they time it out? Is there no process to it?
People here might have seen a rooster actually mount a hen, and it takes about a second, and then they're done. They fluff their feathers, and it looks like it's like, what just happened? And then it's all over, and that's all it takes. Some birds can even do it in midair. Yeah.
Well, what's the point of all the mating rituals?
Well, that's the precursor. It's the courtship. That's where the woman,
the woman. I mean,
the woman bird,
the female bird.
That's where the woman bird gets to choose who she's going to mate with. So all that's the prelude, and then she has to assume a pretty good position to allow him to kind of get in there.
Oh, I see.
And that's all on her. If she doesn't do that, he can't do it. It's very hard. There are some examples of some birds that can kind of force the issue, and they have evolved penis-like structures.
Mallard duck, right?
Ducks are the kind of notorious ones that have enormous corkscrew-shaped penis-like structures. And I'm saying penis-like structures because they're not the same thing that mammals have. It's evolved from different tissue. Completely.
Still considered an external organ?
Yeah, I mean it comes out of the cloaca and it expands, and it's unbelievably crazy, and it's like the length of the entire body of the duck or longer.
Whoa,
it's nuts.
And some sharks are like that too.
Sharks, all sharks have internal fertilization, and they have a pair of penis-like structures on their anal fins. And so the little fins that kind of are next to the cloaca in fish, which most fish have. They're a pair of fins, and male sharks and other cartilaginous fish have a pair of kind of batons that are sticking out of those anal fins, and they use those to transfer sperm for internal fertilization. They're called claspers, sharks. and they're not the same thing as a mammalian penis. They've evolved from completely different structures and tissue, and so that's yet another what I'll call intramittent organ that's evolved independently within vertebrates.
So, coming back to fishes and the birds, and you said in birds is capillarity, and capillarity is something in physics. What it means, if you put a glass tube down in a glass, and then you kind of see the glass, the water kind of rising up the side of the glass, kind of, and it rises up. So that's capillarity basically, and that's the principle. Even really big trees kind of force the water really up to their apex part, like the top part of the leaves and everything. So that's how they force the water to go there. So that's, I understand that. Okay.
I'm glad you did, because I actually kind of don't understand how capillary action works. I just say it a lot.
So capillary action, if I had to break it down very quickly, it would be, for example, the water molecules in there would form a temporary bond with the glass molecules, and then they would drag that water molecule a little bit up, and it kind of continues in that fashion. So that's what capillarity basically in very short. But I understand that in birds, right? Like you have the two openings coming together, and there's the ejaculation, and the ejaculate moves like with the retraction.
Yeah,
but
I'm not actually sure. I'm not sure if there's actually an ejaculation. That's why I said capillary action, because ejaculation would be like a smooth muscle, nervous reaction that actually causes it to shoot out.
But there's a flow needs to come somewhere, and the flow happens, right?
The flow is, I'm saying it's just through simple capillary action.
So, but what I was meaning by ejaculation inside the bird, you're just having some kind of a flow, and like I just said, that just moves smoothly along to the female bird. But the next, the question that I was going to fish is in the water. So that how is
that's more of an ejaculation. So most fish, and there's a ton of them, and most vertebrates are fish. They're pretty simple in the way they reproduce. The female sprays her eggs out of her body cavity through the cloaca, and simultaneously the male sprays a bunch of sperm into the water through his cloaca. And so you've probably all seen that, like with salmon spawning. And the fish will just, and sometimes it's a little bit more intimate, and there's often courtship involved. And if it happens with a couple of fish in fresh water, it's quick, and they'll swim next to each other side by side. And the male, you'll see this little cloud of milt, sperm in the water column. So it's all external, usually in fish. And it's done, because the sperm can easily be transported through the water, and it's all done right there. And other males can kind of sneak in when it's happening and try to fertilize some of the eggs because it's happening outside the body. So there's a lot of fun stuff like that. But with fish, that's kind of the basic pattern, and that's the kind of primitive baseline pattern for all vertebrates. It's external fertilization, aquatic eggs. And then from there you get more fancy. And even some fish have evolved, internal fertilization, intramittent organs, including around here. I'll just quickly mention the mosquito fish we have in Texas. We have several species, some rare ones, endangered ones in Big Bend National Park. The males are colorful, and they've got a little extension along their anal fin that's used as an intramittent organ, and they give live birth right here in Texas. Yeah,
really. Live birth?
Yeah, they have internal fertilization and live birth. The little baby fish come right out of the female's cloaca as a miniature baby fish.
Little tadpole.
Yeah, it looks a little bit like a tadpole, but it's fully formed. It's got all its fins and everything.
Oh, wow.
It's ready to go.
So what about amphibians? We're going to follow this phylogenetic.
Yeah. If we go up, so the basic kind of primitive pattern for amphibians is the same thing. External fertilization in the water, in ponds.
But they're asexual.
No, they got so some are asexual, but most of them have males and females sexual reproduction. And then so that's a kind of primitive condition for amphibians, and actually that's not that common. Even though we assume it's the primitive condition, and most of the earliest amphibians did it that way. Most modern amphibians actually have internal fertilization. You're going to love this. It's weird. So they don't have a penis-like structure, but they have internal fertilization. So how do you do that? How does that work? Can anyone think of a way to get sperm into a female without a penis-like structure?
Your mouth?
Yeah, good.
I mean,
that's a good guess.
A way.
So they don't have cloaca?
They've got a cloaca, but what they don't have is any kind of intramittent organ, but they still have internal fertilization.
Oh, a rock.
So have you guys ever heard of who's the mythic hero in southwestern Native American mythology who has a detachable penis? You know what I'm talking about?
Aphrodite's
I can't-
Native American?
I
or
can't remember.
American.
I
That
can't
would be a
remember.
weird one.
But that's basically what they have. It's not a detachable penis, but they basically drop down this gelatinous blob with a little bit of sperm on the top of it. It's called a spermatophore.
Okay.
And then the female comes along and picks it up if the courtship goes well. And so sometimes you come to these breeding ponds where these salamanders are breeding, and there's hundreds of these spermatophores that they've laid in the pond, hoping that a female will come and pick them up. And so that's how most salamanders do it.
So the universal theory of biology is getting a little creative.
It is. That's a way to do it.
Yeah.
It is a way to do it.
Yeah,
Okay. Well, before we go to our break, my last question,
Uh-huh.
and this is kind of segue into my part where I get to talk about dinosaurs.
Yeah.
Crocodilians.
Crocodilians have a true penis.
Okay.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, and it's
How come you
When
never
I-
see it whenever they
when I say a true penis, that means that somehow some common ancestor between mammals and crocodilians and turtles
Mhm.
did evolve a instrument organ that's pretty much homologous between those three groups. I don't know how that works, but the tissue is the same. It comes out of the cloaca, just like the penis of a kangaroo would. But it's pretty much developmentally the same structure that mammals have, which is weird.
Frogs? Why do frogs sit on top of each other?
Frogs have a cloacal kiss.
Right.
Yeah,
that's
most
what
of them have a cloacal kiss. There's one frog that has retained the tail of the tadpole
Yeah.
as an intermittent organ. There's one frog
That's
on
crazy.
Earth that has a tail, and it's a true tail. It's got all the muscles that like the tadpole uses for the tail,
Yeah.
but only males have it, and it uses it as a penis.
Huh.
That's another separate origination of an intermittent organ, and you know where that frog lives? It's not like Madagascar or Borneo. It's the Pacific Northwest of the United States, called the tailed frog. We got it.
Oregon and
really cool.
Washington and
Yeah.
Seattle.
Yeah.
Now, before we get to the break, I have a quick question. Do these animals, that decide to get together and do they know each other? Is there any emotional connection at all?
There's usually some courtship, and I'll bet you to them that's the same thing.
Oh, okay.
They get to size each other up first. They go on.
You go up some of the animal species, they only mate with only one male.
Like penguins.
Not just penguins. Like I think foxes have only one.
There's monogamy. Yeah,
There's monogamy,
we could do a whole show on monogamy. It's rare, but it does happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, and certainly lifetime monogamy is like the rarest jewel out there. There's hardly any animals that.
I think
mate for
foxes
life.
are one of them made for life.
But if their partner dies, they'd still pick up a new partner.
Like otters.
Otters are on that scale. Some primates, but it's pretty uncommon. There's some mice that are just totally geared for monogamy. It's unbelievable, and they won't it's crazy, but it's rare. It's not the usual pattern.
Huh. Interesting. Okay, well, we're going to go into a quick commercial break. We'll be back with more.
Already, we're back with the Science Nights, and we're talking about sex. We're talking about reproduction in different groups of animals. I'm trying to steer this conversation to dinosaurs for obvious reasons, but we've been talking about reproduction in different groups. We talked about birds and fishes and amphibians, and we kind of finished up by introducing reptilian methods, right?
Yeah.
And Sean mentioned that crocodilians, they have a true penis, and
Turtles have one. It's crazy. Turtles have an enormous penis for their body size. It looks like a big cow tongue, big purple thing. And I think it's because it's so awkward for them to mate.
Right.
And this might have some bearing on our, Stegosaurus conundrum. It's a really awkward position for turtles for the male to get up and under to approach the female cloaca. And so I think that's part of the reason why they have a huge penis, is so it can kind of stretch. And then lizards and snakes have evolved a totally new kind of reproductive male intermittent organ that's crazy. They're called hemipenes. It's got two heads, like a marsupial mammal, and in snakes it's super spiny, and so it's super horrifying. It's terrible looking. And the idea with snakes is I think its sperm transfer is probably super inefficient in snakes, they may have the longest distance to travel. The sperm of a snake may have the longest distance to travel for its body size of any vertebrate. Think about it. Because the testes are inside the snake, and it's got to go all the way down the vas deferens, out through the hemipenes, into the female oviduct, and all the way up to her ovaries that are midway through her body. And think about how long that is for a snake. So I think it takes a long time for a sperm to transfer, and it's done through capillary action. There's no ejaculation. So they've got to stay lodged in there for hours. It takes hours, 8, 12 hours. And so they're locked in with the spiny.
They're like coiled around each other, right? That's what.
Well, in some cases, they do that during courtship, and then when they're actually locked together like that, the female looks super bored, and she starts trying to crawl away, and she drags the male behind her.
I had a Schnauzer and a Scotty in the same house.
They get a coitus lock as well.
Yeah, and I was freaking out. I was like 18 years old when this happened. I thought there was something really wrong.
Yeah, that's not the way it's supposed to go, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen that happen before, and it's kind of the same deal. The female doesn't look too pleased after a while, and she's trying nipping at the male.
Yeah.
Get lost, man.
Yeah, get out of here.
I do have a very funny story, but I'm not going to say that on live air. But
we're not going to be live.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, but
so maybe we'll go right back to reptiles. So that's the selection.
And my question then goes to Thomas was more like, so you have dino eggs, right? Right, we have dino eggs.
We have dino eggs.
Fossil eggs. Now, can we learn anything from there about their sexual stuff, like reproduction?
Well, we can tell that they laid eggs, basically.
Okay.
But I kind of want to go back to what Sean was leading into when it comes to dinosaur reproduction. The first step. We know that comes before the egg, definitely.
Right.
Don't know if the chicken came first, but we know copulation happened first.
Yeah.
So it's one of the biggest mysteries we have in paleontology is how did dinosaurs reproduce? How did they copulate, right? And the kind of fundamental quality of that is physically, how did they do it? Because you're talking some animals like Argentinosaurus, which was probably the largest thing that ever walked on Earth, 50 to 100 tons from modern estimates. So just enormous animals that weighed tons. We look at modern animals and how they go about doing it, and it's feasible, right? But imagine a 100-ton animal trying to mount a female and copulate. It's almost impossible to imagine, and it's still a big mystery. And the reason it's a mystery is one, we've talked about this before. They've been dead for a long time. That's probably the biggest part. We can't actually observe them, although it might be kind of scary to observe dinosaurs going about that. But we've talked in previous episodes about the nature of the fossil record and how fossilization takes place. Usually when we're looking at the material left behind by dinosaurs, it's skeletal material. It's solid bone. So we don't have much preservation of soft tissue, which is what's going to be involved in this process.
And you don't have the benefit of a mammal having a penis bone, and there is such thing.
Yeah.
In many mammals, there's a structure called a baculum, and it supports the penis. So that would leave a fossil.
Yeah.
And obviously, they don't have that.
No dinosaur bacula.
But that's unusual. Mammals are the only vertebrates I know of that have a bone like that. And of course, we humans don't. So I think it went away in some of the primates.
Yeah.
So it's gone.
That we don't have bacula for dinosaurs. We don't have any soft tissue of those parts. So it's a big mystery. And another component to that, what Sean was alluding to, is we've got crocodilians, which are really close relatives to dinosaurs. They're archosaurs. They belong to the same broader group. And we have birds, which are dinosaurs. Right. And the method which they copulate is completely different. Crocodilians, they have a penis. They go about it in the same or similar way that we do. Birds have cloacas, and they pass sperm in a different way. Yeah. So dinosaurs, which are in between, how the hell did they do it? Yeah, it could go either way.
But there's water involved mainly with the crocodilians, right? Does water kind of help, or does that even matter?
I don't know.
Does water have to be present?
They do it underwater.
They do it underwater.
Yeah,
okay, so it has to be present.
But they do it internally though, so it doesn't really matter in that sense. But I'm just telling you, like, so an alligator, they'll achieve copulation, then sink to the bottom, and then sit like that for a while it happens.
Yeah.
But the penis is inside the female's cloaca, and there it would be nice and airtight. It wouldn't matter whether they could do it on land. In other words, it wouldn't make any difference because they're doing it internally either way.
Yeah. Okay.
So I was wondering, so if this is like when you talk about Argentinosaurus and being such huge animals, and on land, because if you're like a blue whale, it's pretty easy. You're moving in water, you're buoyant.
Yeah, they'll support that weight.
And they'll support. But on land, I was thinking, is it possible by any chance instead there would be something like spermatophores where they would lay the sperm and they would come and like some of that?
So,
pretty much anything is possible.
Yeah, anything is possible. And if you look at the evolutionary history of reproduction and what Sean has talked about, it's feasible. It could happen.
Yeah.
They could have returned to a more primitive state where they used the sperm.
I don't see it being too big of a trapeze act for a giant brontosaur type critter, a sauropod of mounting a female and using some sort of penis-like structure to gain intermission. I think it would have been harder for them to pull off a cloacal kiss.
Yeah.
So I'll bet they had a penis
without crushing each
well,
other.
just like the positioning would be totally bonkers.
And tails.
Right,
and
yeah.
everything.
We are not even sure. Are we sure exactly where the reproductive organ lies in these dinosaurs, or do we have
The general neighborhood,
Yeah.
general neighborhood kind of area?
If I were to hold up a dinosaur toy,
It's like,
well, they probably had a cloaca. If you look at their most common ancestors in birds, they have cloacas.
Yeah.
So they probably had the same kind of opening that housed all that stuff.
Yeah.
Now,
The big question is how it happened.
But most dinosaurs, I think I remember you saying, always had some kind of water source around them, right?
No,
They wouldn't be out
that's
here in
the
the middle of
dinosaurs that are
nowhere.
preserved. Yeah, there were dinosaurs that were living in the middle of nowhere. We just don't have a record of them because they don't get preserved. There's nothing to bury them.
Oh, okay.
And that brings up a good point. One of the early hypotheses about how these big long-necked dinosaurs reproduced was that they went into the water. To achieve copulation, they used buoyancy to their advantage, and the male would mount the female while submerged in the water. That hypothesis fell out of favor because we find them in different places where there's not a lot of deep water. Like out here in West Texas, we have Alamosaurus, and it was living in like river valleys. So a animal that's like 80 feet long, dunking into a river is not going to be enough to cause the male to buoyantly float above the female. So sure, it's possible for some of them, but that's kind of fallen out of favor, and that's kind of associated with the early idea that long-necked dinosaurs lived in swamps and were kind of aquatic and would walk with their heads poking up out of the water. But that's kind of been fallen out of favor.
so what we need, as what I'm seeing here, is Jurassic Park, right? That's what I'm
or a time machine.
Some dino DNA.
and reproduce and see what they do.
Yeah, it's and when you look into the study of this, I mean, it's a question that goes all the way back to kind of the incipient stages of paleontology. Like you've got Osborne talking about or wondering how dinosaurs reproduced and all this. So it's an active question, and like you said, will we know the answer? It's impossible to know. And the thing is, dinosaurs were such a diverse and long-lived group that they probably had multiple methods, like fishes.
They could have gave birth to live young, some of them.
Yeah, and I can imagine like the little theropod dinosaurs closely related to birds.
Yeah, viviparity has evolved in almost every single major vertebrate group. So it would be the only two that didn't. Or I guess there's three. And this makes it a harder case that it's going to be dinosaurs, but birds, crocodilians. Although isn't there a marine crocodilian that we think could have been a viviparous crocodile? I covered that in my class. I could be wrong.
Is it off the coast of Australia?
It was
that one that goes from Australia up to South America?
It's a fossil. It's a fossil crocodilian. I think it's a marine one, and I think there's some evidence it might have been a live bear, which would be cool. Which would mean that it's totally possible that dinosaurs could be.
Yeah.
But if all modern crocodilians are egg layers, with no exception, all modern birds are egg layers with no exception. So that means dinosaurs probably all laid eggs. Still think it's possible that viviparity could have evolved there. And then turtles, all of them lay eggs. Those are the only groups. Everything else has evolved live young, at least one species within every major group, pretty much.
So now we can get back to your question, Anirban, about dinosaur eggs. That's one of the kind of the true physical evidence we have of the reproductive cycles of dinosaurs. We actually have eggs. And the funny thing is, when a lot of people think of dinosaur eggs, they think of these nice, intact, spherical eggs. Usually what we find are little bits and pieces. So if you're down in Terlingua and you have a bunch of big spherical objects that you found, they're probably not eggs. You can send me an email.
They could be coprolite.
They could be coprolites. But I get so many people coming by my office who think they have dinosaur eggs. And they're incredibly useful. They're useful not in a kind of biological sense in the most part, but they can tell us a lot about the chemistry of the animal. And some people think that they can be attributed to like the body temperature of the animal, so biochemistry.
Like by studying the chemical structure.
Yeah, because they're crystalline calcite. They're calcium carbonate, so they have carbon isotopes in them. So just like we use carbon isotopes for proxies for other things, we can use them for proxies for temperature. Now, one of the biggest misconceptions about dinosaur eggs, though, is that they're going to be these huge, ginormous spherical things. Well, even long-necked dinosaurs that we can associate with nests had eggs that were like the size of a softball, maybe a little bit bigger. Yeah. They're not enormous, right?
Yeah. They're nearly modern birds that have bigger eggs than that, right? Like the elephant bird, which was, around when people were around. It has an egg that's pretty darn big. It's like the size of nearly the size of a basketball. So.
But emu and ostrich eggs.
Yeah, ostrich eggs are about the size of, I think, what he's described.
Yeah, like maybe a little bit bigger than an ostrich egg.
But imagine a sauropod coming out of an egg that should be hatching a 6-foot-tall bird.
Yeah,
instead,
it's pretty incredible.
50 feet tall.
Yeah.
So they must have grown a lot and fast to get.
Yeah, the thought is that and we actually have evidence. We can look at the growth rings in their bones and kind of chronicle their growth rate. And they're kind of competing hypotheses, but I think for the most part, people have agreed that most dinosaurs grew pretty fast.
Yeah.
Another thing that eggs are useful in telling us as scientists, if we do actually find them intact, and we have found dinosaur nests, is all about behavior. And the process of reproduction is not just copulation.
Yeah.
There's a whole stages. There's courtship, there's display, there's copulation, there's birth, all sorts of things. So when we find these nests, what they tell us, at least in the dinosaur that laid that nest, that there's some form of care following laying of eggs. We find big clutches of eggs that are taken care of. They're arranged just like if you looked at a modern crocodile nest, kind of in a radial pattern. They're covered over by insulatory material. So these dinosaurs were taking care of their eggs.
Yeah.
And then following that, we find sites where multiple dinosaurs have died, where there's juveniles, where there's teenage dinosaurs and adult dinosaurs, indicating that even following coming out of the egg, the parents were taking care of them, right? So eggs can be really useful.
And then you were talking about the thing that happens before copulation. We've been focusing mostly on that, courtship and whatnot. This is where your fossils can really still tell you a lot.
Yeah, and the reason our fossils are so useful in hypothesizing about how the dinosaurs behaved in this kind of pre-copulation phase is because we have all these different groups of dinosaurs that have really unusual, bizarre features to their skeletons. Okay, think Triceratops with its big ornate frill and big horns on its face. I think Stegosaurus with its big plates along its back. Long-necked dinosaurs with their long necks. A lot of scientists think that these features, at least in part, have a lot to do with enticing a mate, with courtship, just like modern animals with display. We had feathered dinosaurs that weren't truly birds, that had big, brightly colored feathers. They weren't for flying, we know that. So they were probably for display. Just like modern birds will fluff themselves up and flap their wings around to impress mates. The dinosaurs probably did the same thing.
Yeah, there's this great paper. I forget who wrote it, but there's this great series of figures in it where throughout animals, they have all these crazy structures like horns and things like that, and big giant mandibles of beetles and things like that. And they made all those structures the same color, like this dark black, and then they size matched all the features. So you'll have like a stag beetle with an enormous set of horns right next to a triceratops, but they're matched for size.
Yeah.
And then all these little adornments all seem super consistent. They're like and they turn up in every vertebrate group.
Mm-hmm.
Sails on the back of newts, crazy, like you brought it up with the rooster, the very first thing you talked about, the comb of a rooster, the neck flange of a rooster and turkeys, all that stuff. If you concentrate on all of those things and match it for size, it's hard to imagine that they could all be for, the other option is that Triceratops used it for defense, which, secondarily probably could use it for defense. A mule deer would use its antlers in self-defense, but the primary reason a mule deer has those antlers is to fight with other mouse.
Yeah, and I mentioned feathers, something I should talk about really quick. One of the great kind of advancements that's happened in paleontology of recent is we can actually determine the true color of feathers, even ones that have been fossilized for millions of years. And this has to do with biology. They have these organelles in the cells called melanosomes, and these are tiny, tiny little organelles. But with modern technology, scientists can actually look at the structure of those melanosomes, and all living things that have colored skin, hair, feathers, whatever, have melanosomes in their cells. So we can compare the structure of these ancient melanosomes in dinosaur feathers to living birds, and we can recolor dinosaurs that have been extinct for millions and millions of years. And we find some really interesting things. Is a lot of them are patterned and colored very similar to modern birds. Like there's Anchiornis that would have had a coloration really similar to a woodpecker. Right, we can tell that it had like a white and red frill on its head. It had black feathers. Archaeopteryx, one of the most well-known vertebrate fossils out there, a transitional fossil between birds and dinosaurs, probably would have been colored like a raven or a crow.
Oh, really? Black?
Yeah, black with iridescence.
Huh. I always thought it was blue or something.
Maybe a good old
all the children's book.
Yeah,
like a Texas grackle.
A good old Texas grackle, yeah. And we can tell that some of these dinosaurs were really brightly colored and probably used their feathers for display.
Okay, well, that's great. Well, okay, got a question for after the break, and it has to do with loneliness. We'll get to that after the break. All right, we are back, everybody, and to finish out this segment of love, we're not going to forget about all those out there that
don't need love.
That don't need love.
The lonely hearts.
You don't need it. No. Nope. But are there any organisms out there that don't require sexual reproduction?
Yeah. So if you're talking about organisms, sexual reproduction is actually not that common because most organisms on Earth are bacteria, single-celled organisms, and none of them have sexual reproduction. And, just to give you an idea how many bacteria there are out there, in your body, there are more bacteria cells than there are your own cells. They're 40 times smaller than your cells, and they're all over you and all in and between all of your cells, and none of them use sexual reproduction.
And sometimes we should actually sometimes I was thinking we should get an expert who actually deals with the body microbes and bacteria and how that does the same. Yeah. Sometimes we have to do the entire show and get some expert on that.
But in terms for vertebrates, it's not that common. Vertebrates like sexual reproduction. Now that doesn't mean in animals, sexual reproduction is super common in animals too. And here's the thing though, you can still have kind of like this asexual reproduction and be an animal. You can have functional male and female gonads in the same individual. You can be a hermaphrodite and still be an animal. So things like jellyfish, coral, sponges, those kind of things.
Right.
They can even be a simultaneous hermaphrodite. They can at the same time have male and female gonads and produce sperm and egg. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're fertilizing themselves. So even something like a sponge, it's sexual reproduction because they have egg and sperm simultaneously, but they broadcast the sperm into the water column and fertilize another individual. And at the same time, that other individual might broadcast sperm to them and then fertilize their eggs. And so it's still sexual, even though they're hermaphrodites. Most flowering, well, almost all plants are hermaphrodites too, like that.
Is that how the immortal jellyfish works too?
I'm not sure. Tell me about
The immortal jellyfish basically is immortal, right? But when it ages, it basically gives birth to itself over again.
Okay,
it's a mystery.
It sounds like, so you're describing parthenogenesis, which is, I think the word means virgin birth, but it's kind of, that's not a great, like that's not a great word for this, but there are some animals that can basically, they kind of, in order to do sexual reproduction, you have to partition into your gametes, into your reproductive cells, half the number of chromosomes you have.
Oh, right.
So that they can pair up with another gamete and then reconstitute the double chromosome number. Some vertebrates even can basically trick that process. We're talking about meiosis here, for those of you guys who took freshman biology. And they can just lay an egg that has 2 chromosomes in it instead of the half number. And if you do that, you're basically laying an egg that's a clone of yourself.
Right.
Yeah. That's what you're talking about.
That's exactly how it works.
We have lizards right here in West Texas that can do that.
Oh, really?
In fact,
what's an example? And where would you find one?
The whiptails are these super common lizards that you see in broad daylight on a hot summer day in the low desert. They're real fast, and they kind of run in a jerky motion. All of you guys have seen, all West Texas listeners know what I'm talking about. They live on the Sul Ross campus in your backyard. They're real fast, stripy-looking lizards. About half the species of whiptails we have in West Texas are all female, and they lay eggs that are clones of themselves. And if you've never seen a whiptail, I'm certain you've seen a Mediterranean gecko, which are those little geckos that climb on your wall outside your house right here in Alpine. Those are all female clones too. They lay an egg, and it's a clone of themselves.
So women can take over the world.
Those can, and they have. The Mediterranean gecko has spread everywhere because it only takes a single individual to start a population.
Is there a male out there somewhere?
No males.
No males.
In that species, there's no male at all. Somewhere in evolutionary history, certainly there was a male parental population somewhere, but it's gone now. With the whiptails, we think that comes about through hybridization between 2 species that have bisexual populations, male and female. And then when those 2 hybridize, that's when you get the all-female clonal species.
All-female. Okay, take notes, ladies.
Yeah. So I have some questions about behavior. Let's get back into groups of animals that actually have sex.
Yeah.
And Conley mentioned the word loneliness.
Yeah.
So I have to admit, I'm a huge nerd when it comes to Wolverines. And I was always, it was always I had this understanding that Wolverines were like cool, solitary animals. And I watched a documentary a couple of years ago that basically threw that out the window. And they like having a mate, and some of them are like...
They pair bond?
Yeah, they pair bond.
Huh. Cool.
But you look at a Wolverine, and you don't think that anything would want to hang out with that. And the reason this kind of prompted my question is someone posted a cool article about the Wolverine range expanding. So are there groups of animals, or are there animals out there that will just mate, take off, and hang out by themselves?
The one that you want, the one you're thinking of, is the mountain lion.
Okay, that makes sense.
Sex is completely functional for them. The males and females tolerate each other, right? The male has like a kind of a harem where his territory encompasses the territory of maybe like 5 or 6 females, and they know they're there, and they smell each other's urine and see each other, and they don't interact otherwise. And then after mating, they're standoffish because the female's like, you're not getting in my kittens, just in case you decide to kill them all.
Yeah. And
mating is super brutal and takes 5 seconds and it's all over with, and they're super solitary. And most cats are like that. The exceptions are some of the ones that form these prides, like lions And they have a little bit more of an intimate kind of thing going on. But a lot of cats are like that, where they just have this brief thing that males and females will fight.
I mean, tigers will do that too.
Yeah, tigers are like that.
Too.
I think tigers might have exactly the same mating system as mountain lions.
Yeah, because male tigers are all solitary. They won't hang around, and the woman will raise the kid.
And it has to do, their hunting behavior is completely solitary. It's ambush hunting. So if you have another cat around, it's not going to help with that.
Yeah.
So you just get in each other's way if you're ambush hunting. So you don't see each other. So I think that's why that's the way it is.
Or be like a praying mantis. Just rip the head off your mate.
Yeah, just eat them afterwards.
And that becomes your sustenance.
Those are such great mating systems.
Yes.
Where the male basically donates his head to the female.
Yes.
To help increase his mating success.
Yeah.
So
I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Could you imagine going into that deal?
And the Black Widow.
The Black Widow does
she
that.
better be worth it.
So
man.
great. And that's like, how in the heck could you ever explain something like that without the unifying theory of biology?
Sure.
It increases their mating success to commit hara-kiri, basically. They do a backflip and let the female devour them because those calories produce more eggs. And that's how it works.
Cannibalistic calories? Or
that's it.
Are they different than eating a leaf?
It's called it's a nuptial gift. It's like, if you marry me, I will give you me. And then you can eat me and we'll have more kids.
Yeah.
And how else would that work? Because the male, somehow there's got to be an instinct for him to be able to do that, and that's the best way for them to increase their mating success.
And think about this way, also like praying mantis or black widow, you don't have to go out and hunt for anything else.
No.
You're there.
The male just comes to you, and then he says, "How does my head look?"
Yeah, and there you have food.
Juicy.
Yeah. But
I saw the most amazing thing. I love praying mantises and their thing. It's so despicable. But I found a female and a male praying mantis with the male mounting the female in copulo. He's inserted himself into her, and he's headless.
Oh,
and
my God.
She's carrying him around.
Oh, no.
A headless male that she's... It's so heavy metal. There's nothing more metal than that.
If you want to see heavy metal, there's a book recommendation. I will give it to you. It's Malazan Book of the Fallen. And in this, there is this actual... sect of people where the women they're like completely crazy, and the second book is called Memories of Ice, and that this actually is happening in the war.
In humans?
So this guy's an anthropologist like Steven Erickson, so he writes about different cultures. So it's a really good series, but he talks about this series completely nuts. They invade one country or a city, and that's what the women do.
We'll put the link to this horrifying book trilogy on the bottom
not trilogy,
of our
it's a
Facebook
10-book
page.
series. It's like
Holy cow.
It's like one of the most widely regarded series in fantasy by this person.
Wow.
It's like, and it's not the women are the warriors, and they are doing this to the men. So
classic Amazon.
And the kid and final thing about them, the children which are born are called children of the dead seed.
Oh man, got it. Nothing subtle about that.
Yeah. Nope.
So when you're out there this Valentine's Day and you're looking across to your love of your life, just remember a headless praying mantis
Cabeza
being
tacos.
carried by the woman who is pregnant.
Yeah.
Just think about that. How romantic. Happy Valentine's Day, everybody.
Yeah, from the Science Nights.
From the Science Nights. We're going to come back next week with another fun episode. We'll see you then. Thanks for listening to this episode of Science Nights in the Morning. Be sure and follow us on Patreon for exclusive gear and uncut episodes. Check out the latest science articles on our Facebook page and subscribe to us on YouTube and your favorite podcast listening app. You can also listen every Saturday at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time at BigBenRadio.com. And if you got a question, we'll join the discussion. Hit the hotline at 432-217-1983 and record your message. We couldn't do this without you, and thank you so much for listening each and every week. That's Science Nights in the Morning with a K, and we'll see you next time.